Welcome to another episode of the FMCG Guys. I'm Daniel Torres. Hi, Cristina Nicolau. How are you?
Hi, Daniel. I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good as well. Hi to our audience as well. Remember to, by the way, follow us on LinkedIn if you haven't yet. We have a bustling community of over 6,000 on the road of 7,000 followers. If we haven't reached them yet by the publishing of this episode. And remember to also listen to our big sister podcast in the US, the CPG Guys, who very recently reached an amazing 25,000 followers, which is pretty amazing. So if they have this followership, it must be for something. Do make sure you follow them. Very excited about our episode today because we have a guest from no other than the pasta king, Barilla. Our guest today is Mariapaola Vetrucci. She is actually the Chief Strategy Officer of Barilla. She joined the company after a stint with Deloitte in their strategy arm, but it doesn't end there because she's also, until very recently, been the general manager of a subsidiary of Barilla, which is Group Wasa, which do shortbreads out of Sweden. So with this background, we're very keen to understand how Mariapaola reached the C-level after being in consulting and how she's actually double-hatted strategy and a semi-CEO role and how that shaped her leadership today.
My name is Mariapaola Vetrucci. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Barilla Group. And in addition to this role, for the past almost 4 years, I've been the general manager for Wasa, that is an iconic brand and the world's largest crisp bread manufacturer. And as we speak, I now am turning to a new role, and I've just finished the assignment on Wasa. And my new role is Chief Strategy Officer, as well as corporate development and venture capital investments for Barilla Group.
Well, congratulations on the expanded scope or new scope, Mariapaola, and thanks for joining us as well. What has it meant? What has the scope been for you as Chief Strategy Officer and General Manager for Wasa, which, by the way, if some people in our audience are not acquainted with it, we can put the link on the show notes and you'll see how it's a very iconic brand and product, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I can start with maybe the Chief Strategy Officer role. I've started my career in consulting, actually, in strategy. And after some first work experience at Deloitte, I joined the Monitor Group, which was a global management consulting firm founded by some thinkers tied to the Harvard Business School. And one of them is, of course, Michael Porter, the very, very famous strategist. And so I've developed corporate strategy and strategic marketing capabilities at Monitor. I think it was a very, very special professional experience at the start of my career that has then led me to the chief strategy role at Barilla. And I think that it's been very, very unique based on two critical factors. One was the intellectual capital, and the other one was the culture that we had at Monitor. So on the intellectual capital side, Monitor was highly recognized for, let's say, fact-based methodologies. And, at that time, there was no advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, but Monitor was already very much focused on data and statistics. So that's the first pillar that really built my love for strategy. So this very strong intellectual capital. And the second was really the culture that we had at Monitor Group, which was very much ahead of the time. It was very international, very diverse. It was really a team of the smartest and brightest, and a very non-hierarchical, open, diverse, collaborative company, building on creativity, intellectual curiosity. And honestly, even if I was very young at that time, I really felt that we could really bring ideas to the table regardless of our seniority. And also another very interesting things from that experience was that back at that time, we were basically location free. We were assigned to very different countries: Germany, UK, France, Italy, Switzerland, South Africa, different industries. In my case, the pharmaceutical, CPG. And this was a very, very meaningful experience that has really shaped me as a person and in my professional career. And then, and this brings me to Barilla, when I was 30, I really had one of those sliding doors moments in my career because I had the opportunity to come back to Italy and join Barilla Group with the thrilling mission to set up the corporate strategy department from scratch. There was nothing there. I don't know if everyone is familiar with Barilla. Barilla is an Italian family-owned company that was founded in Parma, which is north of Italy, back in 1877. It's now led by the fourth generation of entrepreneurs. Our size is almost 5 billion euro. And it's a bit of the epitome of the joy of food that really characterizes the Italian culture. For people around the world, Barilla is an Italian icon, if you will. And for Italians abroad, Barilla means home. So when I got the opportunity to join Barilla, where we produce biscuits, breads, mini cakes, and so on. And the mission that I got from the CEO at that time and the board was to help them really think portfolio at total group level and also bring in more structure in the decision making. Then soon after, I was promoted. I was promoted Chief Strategy Officer based on this experience. And at that time, I probably became, so end of 2011, I became Chief Strategy Officer for the group.
Wow, that's for sure an incredibly enriched journey. And I have to say that the way it started, you had a pretty unique starting point, it feels. And that part, when you mentioned the intellectual capital plus the culture, is something that kind of like really shaped you. But I'm wondering, you transitioned from what was a consulting environment and consulting roles into being now part of the client side, right? So what do you think were your biggest triumphs or the challenges that you faced during this kind of transition?
Yeah, so what helped me in the transition was the fact that joining a company like Barilla that you know through its products makes it very concrete. And you really feel that you're having some sort of impact in the lives of people. So that's a very good part of the story. On the other hand, leading consulting also means that you really have to specialize in a given industry, and that it's not always that easy. And also in terms of culture, I have to say, it was a bit of a big transition because it was a much more traditional company back at the time. And even when I was promoted Chief Strategy Officer, I was basically almost the only woman for a very long time. I was the youngest member of the global leadership team. So I've been the only case of maternity leave in the global leadership team. So it hasn't always been a walk in the park to find space in a more male predominant team of senior executive. But I've learned a lot in terms of perseverance and personal growth. And I have to say that, you lose a little bit the enthusiasm of addressing very different industries, but at the same time, you gain more in-depth understanding. And that is something that I really value a lot. So with hindsight, I'm happy that I transitioned at that time from consulting to the industry, because for me, it made things very much concrete. And you also better realize the impact that you can have on a business.
Mm-hmm. And if you think back, I mean, they must have seen something in you as well when they hired you to hire somebody that's been a consultant. There's always a lot of skepticism when you bring them into a corporate environment, even if it's in a strategy role. They must have really liked something from you to hire you in that capacity in a role that starts with a C, right?
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, the CEO at that time was very much visionary. It took a big risk also because I was, again, super young. It gave me a lot of responsibility, and I thank him a lot for that. But I have to say that probably what I've tried to leverage was a little bit my humbleness and empathy, in a sense that I've tried to learn. I knew from day one that I had to learn so much from the people, listen to what they had to say. I've had a great mentor in the company, particularly the chief supply chain officer. So people that had tens of years of experience in the same markets and technologies, and they've really taught me a lot. On my side, I've brought maybe a little bit of structure in thinking about opportunities, in both in terms of strategic planning, but also when we were looking at maybe opportunities of business development, whether organic or non-organic. It hasn't always been easy because, of course, it's hard to stir strategic alignment in a company, even more so if it's not a public company. You know, it's not always easy to stir the activities of the company towards fewer choices. Companies tend to want to do many things. So it's the role of the CSO is also to really try and help being focused, taking complex decisions even when you don't have all the elements, realigning resources. So things that are not necessarily very easy. But you also have the opportunity to really make a difference and supporting the CEO and the management team to drive and make a difference. And I think that one of the things that I enjoyed the most in the journey is the strategy. In essence, is really about problem solving. So you really get used to dissecting problems, bringing outside-in perspective, asking the right question. And I'm really convinced that this is something that helps you in any condition, in every job you might take afterwards. Even because many times, you know, people really mix up strategy with planning, and they're two very, very different things. And this is something that I always tell my teams. Always remember the difference between strategy and planning. You need both, but they're very different. I don't know if you're familiar with the works of Roger Martin, that is one of my favorite authors. And he always talks about the fact that strategy is about making integrated set of choices to win in the marketplace, to create a superior value over the long term. And it really requires you to think about what's your unique value proposition, how you're different from competitors. One thing that drives me crazy is that many times in companies you see people trying to mimic, to copy competitors, which is the easiest way to generate basically a commoditization of an industry. So you really always have to think, how can I be different? And this is very different from planning. Planning is more about organizing activity to set the direction that you have in your strategy. So they're both important, but sometimes there's misconception and they're confused. And another misconception that I've learned in working in strategy, that I think it's very important for business in general, is that in business to win, you need both rigor and creativity. Many times people think strategy is all about rigor, analysis, but that's not at all the case. Of course, there's an element of rigor, of using the data, using the methodologies, taking informed decisions. But at the same time, to be unique and to create value, you really have to always think differently, challenge the status quo, come up with innovative solutions. So this instead requires brainstorming, it requires listening to consumers, it requires encouraging diverse perspectives, fostering a culture of innovation, of risk-taking. So I think that putting together rigor, creativity, and of course, hands-on execution are some of the ingredients that I've learned working in strategy that I think will be useful forever for me.
For sure, they will be useful forever. And I think that this is incredible. You, as a young woman, being in such a traditional company, coming from the outside, and being there to kind of like steer the wheel and make sure that you keep the laser focus on what needs to be executed in order to win with the unique value proposition, and all these aspects that you're bringing in, from rigor to creativity that you mentioned. I absolutely love that. And then a few years later, you also take out the role of the business unit president at Wasa, right? And I'm wondering, what keeps you up at night with this new role, which is now becoming old, I understand? And how different was this suddenly from being kind of like more on the strategic point for most of your career, now more to the execution and leading the organization there?
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is a very interesting question. Indeed, it was a very different assignment. So basically, we're talking about 2019. So basically 10 years after I joined the company. And as you said, basically my work was primarily on corporate strategy and transformation. Basically, the company decided to really bring me on a P&L responsibility. And I was asked to lead and transform the Wasa business. What is Wasa? Maybe I don't know if everyone is aware of what Wasa is. It's an iconic, quintessentially Swedish brand that has more than 100 years. It was indeed founded in 1919. And these crisp breads that are primarily rye-based are very, very healthy, very made up of 3 ingredients and very, very good for your guts, very good for your microbiota, full of micronutrients. So very healthy products, a bit traditional. And this business was basically acquired in 1999 by Barilla Group from Novartis. And in 2019, so basically 20 years after its acquisition, Barilla decided to refocus on Wasa and make it a global strategic priority. And basically, they gave me the freedom of putting together a team of talented individuals and building a dedicated cross-functional organization, which would encompass marketing, product development, finance, and supply chain and so on, and design and pilot basically a new way of working to work with all the functions and all the regions. At the time, basically, there was no such thing as a business unit or category organization because our company was structured in regions and functions. And my mission was to set up this new way of working, but more importantly, to basically transform this iconic yet very traditional business into some sort of a startup with an innovative and entrepreneurial spirit. So in a way, back to your question, of course, I could leverage the strategy and transformation let's say, competencies that I had developed. But it was really a moment where I could showcase that I could be also a very hands-on, pragmatic leader of a business. And so the first thing we did, was to really start with the consumers. I think it's always critical to start with what you're trying to solve for and what you mean for people. So we completely rethought the brand positioning and the growth strategy. We had to rediscover what the brand was about and really trying to stay true to its origin. It was honestly an enormous responsibility when you deal with such a fantastic brand, which I've been loving for many years, well before joining Barilla or working on Wasa. So it's about really staying true to the timeless value of the brand that reflect very much the Nordic society. So in this case, balance, wholesome taste, sustainability, which are values that are more and more contemporary, I believe. And another point in branding was to really try and have a global consistency, but at the same time being able to balance that with the very insightful differences that the markets, different countries were highlighting. And so we've tried to balance a global brand positioning with a local execution that was meaningful for different peoples around the world. And so also in terms of business strategy, which was the other part, so the international development, we've tried to tweak our approach to market to reflect the differences in the specific level of maturity of the different markets. For example, in the Nordics markets, Wasa is a very, very strong brand in food, and we've been developing in premium innovation. In some other markets, for example, we had to go back to the basics and to fix the fundamentals in terms of structure, profitability. But the most exciting part of the job, in my opinion, has been to establish Wasa in new markets, where we've tried to turn a traditional brand into a startup, almost a challenger brand. Basically, the insight is that Wasa is a product that either you hate or you love. And this is actually great, I believe, because you at least stand for something that is distinctive and unique. And so we basically shifted, with the help of the markets, we've shifted all of our marketing and commercial strategies from a mainstream approach to a very targeted approach. So really escaping the temptation to target anyone and really focusing on the right people so that are more aware about health and wellness, about that have normally higher levels of education, higher levels of income, and so on. And doing this is very different. So we've tried to experiment around the brand, around the geographic expansion. And then another important element, the third one, has been to renew our industrial assets. We have 2 plants, and we've been really working to renew our 2 factories. And meanwhile, of course, we had to face, as anyone else, the COVID-19, the global supply chain disruptions, and the hyperinflation. And when I started working on Wasa, of course, I was super humble because there were more people that had many more years of, marketing or commercial experience. But in reality, that it's a bit overrated, I would believe, because as soon as you're open enough to put together people, leveraging people for their own skills in different parts of the organization, and really focusing on what needs to get done and on the right culture, I think you can really have an impact. And in our case, I say our because, of course, my team has been in the driving seat with me. I think that we've really tried to build an organization that was open, so a well-functioning metrics organization. We've tried to really build a team and a culture that was multifunctional, collaborative, non-hierarchical, listening to the markets, but at the same time being firm enough to establish the global needs in terms of end-to-end value chain. And also behaving like owners, turning every stone, try to optimize, really feeling like the owners of this brand, to spend efficiently, effectively, because many times in big corporation, you lose the sight of what you feel just a part of a mechanism, and you don't feel responsible for what you have to bring.
Yeah. And speaking of leadership, obviously you come from a different school to the one that a lot of people from big FMCG leadership come from. So you come from consulting, which is a very horizontal type of leadership. How do you lead your teams now? I mean, that's a conversation that I know we've touched on in the past around, being self-aware is something that you put a lot of importance towards. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think that, I strive every day to bring, I think, 3 ingredients in the way I lead, in a nutshell are basically vision, but also hands-on pragmatism, and third, authenticity. When I say vision is, again, what I said before, really having a strategic mindset is very much about asking the right questions. So I think this is the first thing that I bring every day. The second is honestly what I call the hands-on pragmatism, is the fact that I'm a hard worker. I take responsibility. I'm rather humble. I've had a very humble upbringing, and I've learned from my mother, from my family, to always be very honest, grounded, to roll up my sleeves, and to face whatever problem you might encounter in life, just by working, by sweating, by giving your utmost effort and dedication. And the third point is trying to be authentic. I try to work every day on my self-awareness. I love to build trust and foster positive relationship among the team members. And when I say self-awareness, for me, that's really key. And I think we spoke about it in the past, the two of us. I really believe in what Socrates used to say, that knowing yourself is the beginning of the wisdom. I am a person that has learned to know her own story, and understanding what is driving me, what really sucks energies out of my body, because in corporate lives it's very, very easy to lose yourself in the in achieving something and going to the next level, but sometimes you lose sight of who you are, what are your values, and I think that as I have grown older, I've become much better at that, at regrounding myself into being grateful every day for what I have, and try to learn every day, try to listen and grow every day, trying to be empathetic. And in all this, in my mind, one of the key things that we should all leverage is our neuroplasticity, the usual growth mindset, if you will, because we have these amazing brains that many times we block with our own beliefs, with our own fears. And over time, I've really learned to quote unquote re-engineer my brain to really understand, being self-aware about my emotions, by thinking my beliefs. And every morning, every evening, I reflect on how each day went. If I'm moving towards my direction, I try to think about all the things that I'm grateful for. I try to think of the things that I've done well that day, maybe things that I could have done better, not in terms of failure, but in terms of trying to be better the next day. And every morning I try to think about, okay, today, this is what I will let go of, and this is what I want to focus on. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very, very important for leaders to exert this kind of self-awareness, to face the difficulties and to guide people in very treacherous waters sometimes.
Feels as if there is a need to be also strategic and pragmatic when it comes to observing and understanding yourself as well, and making the choices for the day ahead. And I cannot imagine, like we talked about how the Barilla company chose you, Mariapaola, to come, and you came from consulting, but you were also the only woman at the board level, right? On the C-suite. And I can't help but wonder, how do you feel about the whole diversity and inclusion part of the business? I noticed that you've been on the diversity and inclusion board, so you're very passionate about it. Where are we right now? And what is left for us? What not left, but rather what is the next step that we should be focusing on if you were to bring that strategic focus to it?
Yeah, well, this is a very good question. I think that it's more than 10 years that Barilla has been very much focused on diversity and inclusion. Back in 2013, I was involved in a very small group to set up the diversity and inclusion journey for the group. And as you said, it was very meaningful to me because I have always felt big part of a minority in the leadership because I was a woman, because I was younger, because I was a mother, because I was a caregiver of elderly family members. So many times I felt different from your typical executive C-suite cliche. And sometimes with this comes, the imposter syndrome, all these kind of things. And the diversity and inclusion journey has been very enriching for me. The company has taken things very, very seriously. The CEO at the time gave us a mission of introspection and discovery. It was not just a title. It was really a cultural shift that we embraced. And basically we partnered with external organizations. We've made the changes in policies, procedures. We've set up an entire new diversity and inclusion board. We've hold the senior leadership accountable for their effort on diversity and inclusion. But the one thing that, in my opinion, was the most impactful was the work that we did on unconscious biases. Because in reality, all of us have unconscious biases, and we're just, again, not aware because they are unconscious. And so we've worked very much in training basically all the organization in recognizing all of us to see our own unconscious bias in addressing them. And it's not, a one-time effort. It's really a continuous process that requires commitment. And the ultimate goal is, of course, to overcome these unconscious biases and really having an inclusive environment. What does it mean? It means really an environment where actually people feel valued for who they are authentically and have equal opportunities to succeed. So that to me was really impactful. And back to your questions on results, we've had very significant results. We have more than 1,000 employees today that are involved in ERGs, employee resource groups, who are passionate about different topics from international mindset to gender balance to LGBTQ to age, ethnicity, very, very, very different approaches. And just to name an example in terms of women empowerment, we've moved from 8% to 29% women in Barilla's top positions, let's say VPs and so on, from 2013 to 2021. So I think quite an amazing work. And with
what's the percentage change again?
From 2013 to 2021, we moved from 8% to 29%. So that's a very good result.
That's
of course.
3, yeah.
I think that back here to the question on the strategic approach to D&I, I believe that since the start we were right in trying to frame the diversity and inclusion journey into something that was really fundamental for business. As a company that is trying to become more and more international, having an open mindset, being inclusive, trying to understand different culture is very much at the center of your ability as an organization to understand consumers, retailers, your ecosystems, wherever you go in the world, and building value through employees, with consumers, with customers. So I think that the more you treat it as a capability that is very much entrenched in your business proposition, the better it is. So it's not something that you do in your spare time, in my opinion. It's the same thing as sustainability. I'm also super passionate about sustainability, but this is not something you should do, just because you have to. It's really something that should be ingrained into your business strategy to add value for your company, for the ecosystem of partners you work with.
And Mariapaola, this has been very interesting. And I think that the sustainability topic could be for a whole other conversation. Like, for example, recently we had Anne Tracy on the show, the Chief Sustainability Officer of Colgate-Palmolive. And we practically only talked about sustainability, and we could have been talking with her for more than half an hour more, right, Christina?
Absolutely.
So wanted to ask you one last thing, Mariapaola, and this is a question where we ask all our guests, as our listeners will know. It's a very simple but very valuable question. It's, if you were to go to yourself right at the beginning of your career, with everything that you've learned on the way, what is the one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I think balance. If I have to say just one, balance. If I can say three, is combining balance, learning, and fun. Why do I say balance? Because I think that as a person that, again, was very much hands-on and hardworking, in corporate life is very, very easy to lose track of yourself and not to have a balanced life. And I've come to understand that you can only be effective in your job if you do have a balanced life. So it's not, life is not a sprint. It's not one sprint after the other. You really need to have the time to recharge. And if you don't recharge, you basically lose track of what you value. You lose self-awareness, and you lose the clarity of mind, which is one of the most important things that we bring to a company every day, or to our families, or to anyone. So it's very, very critical in order to be effective as a leader, as a person in a company, to live a balanced life. And then again, I think balance is one, and then learning and fun for me are the other two ingredients. Learning, because I think, if you stop growing, if you stop learning, there's something wrong there. So that's key. I love learning, and I think this is should be key for anyone. And the other one is having fun, because honestly, yeah, it's fine. We're here. Of course, it's a job, and so one should. It's not necessarily, fun is not necessarily the first word you think about when you think about a job. But in reality, with the Wasa experience particularly, but also when I was back at Monitor, you understand that you do your best work when you're having fun with your team. So balance, learning, and fun are probably the three things that I would try and tell myself as a younger lady approaching the job market.
This was Mariapaola Vetrucci, Chief Strategy Officer at Barilla. Christina, what are your key takeaways from this conversation?
Mariapaola is quite incredible. The steps she decided to make in her career, it's not just she left consulting to go into the FMCG side, but she also left a really big multinational company to join a very traditional, family-owned one. And at the time she joined, she was the only woman in a leadership position there. I cannot even imagine how hard this must have been for her.
Yeah, and I think that through the years that she's been at Barilla, I've really seen an evolution of the company to being, like, as you said, family-owned Italian company, to be really a truly international business. And that's really boomed in the US and has very good talent, I can tell you, very good talent there.
Exactly. So it's all about now looking at the future and see how we can get more of these shifts in big companies that are kind of trying to make this transition into the modern world. But at the end of the day, it's really about getting good talent, as Mariapaola is, for example.
I can't insist enough on that, Christina.
From your point of view.
Exactly. No, but it is true. It is true. You see companies that hire great talent, they in general do well, with a few honorable exceptions, but in general, that's how it works. And then, something that I thought was interesting is the fact that the work she's done in diversity and inclusion, really focusing on unconscious biases, and having DEI entrenched in the business plan as one of the things that you have to work on, and not just as an extra, right?
Yes, it's definitely not an extra. And especially when you're in a culture where this is something relatively new, we all come with the unconscious biases.
Yeah.
This is about how we've been raised. Also, if you're a part of a Mediterranean country, for sure, these things are kind of like still prevailing in our minds and the way we're raising kids. So it takes an effort to recognize your way of thinking and to make that shift in your mind, the way you act and the way you enable all that good, great talent to actually thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. Didn't she also had a term that she mentioned which sounds like an oxymoron, like a contradiction per se, but I think was interesting, which is she talked about pragmatic strategy, right?
Yeah, I like her approach. It's that like we need to be very clear what planning is versus what strategy is, where you need to have rigor, where you need to be more creative about stuff. But at the end of the day, you cannot only just have vision. You need to have the vision there, make sure everyone understands it and can follow it. But you also need to have this hands-on pragmatism about how you're going to go about delivering things. And I love that she actually complemented that with a third pillar, which is very important, and that's creating a safe space and have this authentic culture in the company.
Yeah, which culture is important. I was just talking with someone today that's growing a company, and they said, look, we're hiring, but we need to hire slow. And it's not limited by the business that's coming in, but more limited by the culture we're trying to build, because it's a really delicate balance, right? And it's good that the chief strategy officer, which is somebody intimately close to the CEO, is really having that in mind.
It is, and I do believe that her role also as president and CEO of the Wasa department, when you have a full organization to lead and not just a function, that's where this becomes a reality, right? When you really need to figure out what's not just the brand of your function, but rather the culture of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Christina. Very interesting notes. Thanks also to Mariapaola, for joining us. It was a great episode. I hope you enjoyed it as well as a listener, and we'll see you in the next week of the FNCG, guys. Bye.